One film is considered, if at all, a largely disposable piece of pop entertainment from the late aughts. The other, a masterpiece of pure cinematic spectacle, a critical piece of the filmography of perhaps our greatest auteur. Based on these descriptions, the notion of forging a connection between them based on a common setting, Mount Rushmore, comes off as, well, silly. Granted, common use of setting is not the stuff of cogent criticism. If one were to, say, do a comparative analysis of the films The Smurfs and Escape from New York simply based on a shared location, one criticism would be to say that the person making the argument was delusional. This kind of pattern-seeking behavior can be innocuous. It can also be deeply paranoid, and given the right motivation and context, blossom into massive online-based conspiracies. And let's not kid ourselves, before QAnon there was trutherism, and the folks who devised the National Treasure movies were certainly cashing in on the conspiratorial scent in the air post 9/11. The National Treasure films, made during the Bush era at the height of the Iraq War, might on the surface be anodyne conspiracy narratives. But when we look a little closer, these pop culture confections can be read as perverse manifestations of a culture caught in the interregnum, pulled in two opposing directions at once, in a kind of threesome of competing desires, if you will. But we will get to the sex talk in a moment. To say that both National Treasure and North by Northwest are products of their time is a diagnostic that can be useful in pointing out the overall trajectory of the United States and the way in which its mass cultural entertainments reflected back to the public a strikingly different self-image in a span of less than 50 years. Moreover, that dissonance is very illuminating, because these two films share more in common than you might think at first blush. And I mean beyond just having their climactic scenes set at Mount Rushmore, although that is an important tether. Both movies are quest narratives, of a sort that simultaneously contain a desire for personal or familial redemption and national salvation. Both movies had the central character taken hostage at crucial moments and forced to act in the service of nefarious ends, which, ironically, come to be redemptive of the nation-state as a whole. Both Roger Thornhill and Ben Gates are reluctantly drawn into a plot which transforms each of them into Americanized Knights of the Round Table. And in their triumph, the nation stands affirmed and unified. Sort of. Yes, there are obvious surface-level differences. One trades on suspense, the other mystery. Grant and Cage have, shall we say, divergent acting styles, etc. And I'm aware that juxtaposing the two films is tantamount to heresy against the greatest of our transatlantic auteurs. Some might see it as the equivalent of comparing Van Gogh to a reworking of Starry Night into some ad campaign for insomnia medication. But it's important to remember that Hitchcock made movies for the masses every bit as much as he did for his personal art. Both films were the 9th highest grossing movies in their respective years. And if we're being honest, both are trifles, throwaway entertainments of a kind. The crucial distinction is that North by Northwest behaves as if it was a trifle, and thus is free to fulsomely expose its hollowness through visual iconography. National Treasure 2, on the other hand, is wrestling between earnest nation-state propaganda
brightest men in our country sat at that desk for over 100 years.
And playful, incipient romantic irony of the Hitchcockian variety.
Ben, look at this, look!
Yeah, that's where they slit the throat, cut the heart out.
Which Hitchcock scholar Richard Allen defines as the combination of the heterosexual romantic ideal with its opposite, human perversity.
You little fool.
Just stay away from me.
It is this tension, brought about because of the film's dual set of obligations, as a minor allusion to the high modern period of Hitchcock's work, and also to the exigencies of the Disney studio machine, the corporate commissar to the American public and to the world at large. Reductively, one could say that North by Northwest observes institutional misanthropy. I am reminded of Burn After Reading at certain points, while National Treasure 2 elaborates unwavering institutional fealty. But it is fealty bound up with perversity. The neurosis that National Treasure 2 is exposing in this tension of allegiances has to do with America at its Cold War zenith and America in the 50 years hence. A culture that has been shot to pieces with assassinations, national tragedies, loss of purpose at the end of history, and the rise of conspiracy narratives as a heuristic for explaining the decline of American empire. The seductive aspect of National Treasure 2 is that it attempts to bend conspiracy against its own aim. Smoking gun revelations that do not reveal and dissolve the corrupted institutional firmament, but instead do the opposite, reaffirming and glorifying the exceptional nature of the American project. In brief, here's the plot of National Treasure 2.
Ben Gates' ancestor, Thomas Gates, was confronted by agents of the KGC, that's Knights of the Golden Circle, Confederate spies, 5 days after the end of the Civil War, to decipher a code they somehow received. This is never explained, maybe from Queen Victoria, who we learned dug the Confederacy, that provides a clue to the whereabouts of the lost city of gold, Cibola. Gates is shot and killed and attempting to resist being drawn into the plot, but one of the agents, John Wilkes Booth, famously does his thing, shouts in Latin, and he and his conspirators are eventually arrested and hanged for killing Lincoln. Cut to modern day, and Mitchell Wilkinson, played by Ed Harris, and I 100% think this is intentional casting to make his abrupt turn at the climax more acceptable to the audience, shows up to question the Gates family history. The two Gates men, along with plucky sidekick Riley, Ben's estranged fiancée Abigail, and newcomer Emily, Patrick's ex-wife, proceed clue by clue to tracking down the veracity of Wilkinson's claim, and by extension doing what all of history's explorers and conquistadors never could, find the lost city of gold.
When General Custer's search for gold ended with his last stand at Little Bighorn, it became clear.
None would ever find it.
It's a mess of a plot, and dead on arrival to boot, because at the very beginning, we know that the Confederate plot to fund its war effort by finding the city of gold after the South had already surrendered.
You're wrong about that. The war has only just begun.
Wilkinson, it is important to note, is a black operator of the Eric Prince Blackwater variety, who made a fortune in private paramilitary contracting and now treasure hunts as a legacy for his family name. Speaking of family, his lineage goes back to a Civil War Confederate general, the last name of Pike, who apparently was pen pals with Queen Vicky. I contend that Wilkinson is also the worthy sexual facilitator for Ben and Abigail, replacing the poor benighted Riley, Ben's assistant,
Riley, come out here.
who never gets any credit for his work and must find his own heterosexual romance in order to be legitimated in the eyes of the public and us, the viewer. In both movies, it is with the two climaxes and resolutions, both taking place at America's national totem, Mount Rushmore, that a sense of America's self-image is clearly delineated. And by climax, I mean, well, you know. Riley, as the comic relief character, is framed in the film as an obstacle interfering with the reunion of Ben and Abigail, an event which will symbolically restore the proper social order for us in the audience. In the resolution scene, Abigail and Riley are standing behind Ben, as if they are a couple. The president hails them all, in the Althusserian sense of being interpolated as subjects, symbolically transforming them into modern-day knights who have found the Holy Grail and restored honor to the kingdom.
On this day, you have brought honor to your country and your family.
Ben then starts to offer a correction, but before he does so, he turns to look at Abigail for approval. This look breaks the visual pairing of Riley and Abigail and replaces it with Ben and Abigail. She smiles, a kind of wordless approval of what Ben is about to do. The camera then goes back to the head-level shots of Ben and the president, co-equals in male-only space, and Ben states unequivocally that Mitchell Wilkinson should also be given credit. No matter how you read this glance between Ben and Abigail, it is more than a little curious that he would look to her for assent and that she would so readily agree. This sequence of shots breaks apart the fraudulent couple, seemingly more natural because of the relative closeness in their ages, establishes the legitimate couple, and brings into that romantic bond the heretofore outsider, Wilkinson, the black operator, with a Confederate lineage who up to now was the villain and moments earlier had even held a knife to Abigail's throat. Her apparent indifference about Wilkinson's disreputable background and his villainous pursuit and kidnapping of the protagonist until his heroic turn at the very end enables his reputation to be restored posthumously. Moreover, and perversely, this is accomplished via the look itself, which is loaded with meaning. and places Wilkinson squarely in the middle of it all. Wilkinson will thus be included in the official history, partially already written, as the president displays to Gates. This suggests the artificial nature of these sorts of historical watershed moments, and therefore unintentionally subsumes a clear expression of patriotic exceptionalism within a framework of subversive conspiracy, an odd moment to be sure. But with his inclusion in Ben and Abigail's romantic space, Wilkinson is endorsed by the film as a better symbolic partner, as it were, than Riley. And to further link this with Hitchcockian themes in Freud, it implies through visual language mutual sexual consent that will have the effect of binding the nation-state, the land itself, and the indigenous people of America in a kind of sexualized crucible. And if you think this is nonsense, let's stop for a moment and do a counterfactual. What would the story have been without Wilkinson? The mortal peril that he foisted upon them all, which forced the discovery of a legendary city hidden inside our national totem, enabled the subsequent renewal of vows, as it were, both between the multiple estranged couples and between Ben and his country. The president pardons Ben's transgressions, which saves him from prison. Therefore, the look between Abigail and Ben is a recognition that without Wilkinson, there is no them. We further recognize that without Wilkinson, there is no righteous claim to glory for the state to make. Wilkinson, therefore, is an embodiment of the perversion, a mortal threat, and a potential rival for Abigail's affection that makes the romantic ideal and the nationalistic ideal possible. The resolution offered in North by Northwest is similar, where the proper social order is represented by a revivification of a once acrimonious heterosexual partnership of the two protagonists. But here, the renewal requires the replacement of one sexual partner, James Mason's Philip Van Dam, for Cary Grant's Roger Thornhill. The female remains the same, which then places her in a central, albeit passive role in the courtship rituals. What sits at kind of an odd angle to National Treasure 2's interpersonal dynamics is that North by Northwest has a love triangle between Eve Kendall, Van Dam, and Martin Landau's Leonard. This is what must be broken apart for the more acceptable romantic coupling. The relationship between Leonard and Van Dam was clearly homosexual in nature, if unrequited on Van Dam's part. Production codes, anti-communist hysteria, and perhaps other forces combined to kill off Leonard during the climactic scene across Mount Rushmore's face. The effete Van Dam is left alive, and his punishment is not simply prison for state espionage. In fact, Hitchcock's MacGuffin plot leaves that as a secondary detail. Van Dam's real punishment is being upstaged by a more suitable male companion for Eve. The offhanded insouciance by which heterosexual romance is rekindled in North by Northwest's equally absurd plot, complete with the indecorous frolic across the Founding Fathers, suggests an America at the height of its hegemony. And therefore, like the Caesars of old, it condones internal mockery without a thought.
War is hell, Mr. Thornhill, even when it's a cold one.
Perhaps you ought to start learning how to lose a few cold wars.
As previously stated, what is perverse is the implication that for both the characters within the films and we the audience watching them, the titillation of mortal danger can lead to unqualified positive social outcomes. It is only out of this threat, along with the threat of perverse sexual partnerships and arrangements, that the ideal social order of heterosexual coupling can be renewed and strengthened. And in both films, this cause-effect sequence pays off with the concluding shots. Hitchcock's famous ending, the cut-on action of Roger pulling Eve up from the cliff into the marriage bed on the train, followed by the phallic penetration of the train into the tunnel, perhaps is even more explicit in the arrangement of shots concluding National Treasure 2. Abigail is sitting on the wall with Ben below her. This inverts the shot in North by Northwest, with the woman now in a higher position. Abigail then proceeds to be somewhat coy in suggesting that Ben move back in with her. At the suggestion, the gender stereotypes abruptly shift, with Ben playing the female role as hard to get. Abigail, in a final temptation, says alluringly to Ben that he is so good at figuring out puzzles.
It's sort of like a puzzle.
And this is the best reason for them to rekindle their relationship. The use of the term puzzle here is very clearly and deliberately a sexual one. It harkens back to the end of the first National Treasure movie, in which the denouement shows Abigail and Ben now coupled following the discovery of the Masonic treasure. Abigail has drawn Ben a treasure map, echoing the plot devices we have encountered in the story. Ben, naively, asks what it will lead to.
Where does it lead to?
Abigail, again being coy and suggestive, says, "You'll figure it out." Yes, the map leads to her vagina. So at the end of National Treasure 2, when she says that he is so good at puzzles, the innuendo embedded within is that Ben is very good at unlocking the mysteries of her vagina. And then they kiss. And the camera pans up to the stern yet somehow approving faces of the dead president. It is interesting to note how differently the monument is used as background in the two movies. Hitchcock employs it satirically to contrast with the absurdities happening to the characters. Fireworks then go off, which is a common, crude metaphor for sex, used by Hitchcock, coincidentally, in To Catch a Thief to the same end. But with this camera move, the scene with the president in which Wilkinson is brought into a sexual triangulation, replacing Riley as a partner, returns with gusto. This is because Abigail's use of the word puzzle, which is now a stand-in for her vagina, was the very same word used moments earlier in a much different context by Wilkinson.
It's not a puzzle! No more puzzles, Ben!
He says to Ben in his moment of self-sacrifice for the group that not everything is a puzzle. And it should not be overlooked, Wilkinson is now entombed inside of the mountain. So with these concatenations of imagery and dialogue, the use of the word puzzle and its cross-references to Abigail, Wilkinson, and Ben, the fireworks as a celebration of the sexual act to come, and Mount Rushmore completing the triangle in the frame, we establish the symbolic sexual threesome.
Oh, behave. Yeah, baby. Yeah.
Perhaps Mount Rushmore itself, a stand-in for the nation, is now the third partner. Either way, the monument contains within it not only the dead body of Wilkinson now remembered in honor, i.e. the redemption of the antebellum South, if you can believe it, in 2007, but also has secretly nurtured the semiotic linchpin of all indigenous pre-Columbian societies, Aztec, Mayan, American tribes, you name it. National Treasure 2 thus makes all of these strange bedfellows, pun intended, into a union bonded through the sexual reunification of Ben and Abigail. That's Benjamin Franklin Gates, and Abigail as in Abigail Adams, wife of John. This movie is desperate to make us all horny for mythologized American history, just so long that we, like Abigail, suppress in our own minds what actually happened.